is 5:22. I'll call this meeting to order. Excuse me. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Join us, I should say.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we need roll call?
Yes, sir. Mayor Wycombe,
Here.
Vice Mayor Wills,
Here.
Councilman Durst,
Here.
Councilman Garner,
Here.
Councilman Martinez,
Here.
Councilman Smith,
Here.
Councilman Weisenberg.
Here.
All are present, sir.
Okay, thank you. And the sole purpose of this meeting is to talk with Dirty Boys, correct?
Is to discuss haulers licenses. Mr. Levin from Wyoming Waste is also on the telephone so that he can be privy to any discussions as well.
Okay, thanks. Is it proper for Councilman Garner to be in the room or not?
He should be excused at this time.
Okay, thank you.
This meeting is being audio recorded. I will be taking minutes. We have the mics on simply for the audio, but we do not have a live feed going out to the community right now.
Okay, thanks. I believe you have to leave the room.
So that's my question is why, because,
Yeah, it's in the ordinance, we found it in the ordinance. You have to absent yourself from it.
so but by not voting, he's still a city leader and he should be privy to what's happening, even if he can't vote.
He's not
He should know the
supposed.
information.
He's not supposed to even be present.
I can tell you, I one time ran Mr. Ralph Glenn out. We were discussing something that he was involved with. I kind of blew it. He allowed to stay in here and he talked and everything. Then I booted him out and it was too late. He already convinced the vote went the other
He's
way.
not supposed to be present for these
So,
discussions.
I know how that works.
So then you didn't say anything last week.
You're correct. I didn't.
So now we have president that he should be able to stay.
No.
No. I did make a mistake last time, but he is not supposed to be in. I made a mistake on the time that he stayed on the telephone as well.
Do you want to just set forth the ordinance so that it's on the record?
You got my book. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Is this a hill we want to die on tonight? That's not the purpose for us being here, and I believe that the purpose for being here is more important.
I will leave that up to Councilman Garner because it's not my issue to, I disagree with the fact that he needs to leave and I stated that, so I'm fine.
I'm still looking, but
Is it 19?
I have it here.
Very plain.
there's some weird spot. So would you agree to step out?
Yeah, I'll agree, if that's what the ordinance reads, then that's fine.
It's what the state statute reads. I can't find the ordinance. I'm more than happy to go up and get my state statute book.
Just if you can follow up after the meeting.
I'd be more than happy to. I can even write you a letter.
Okay,
Okay.
that'll work.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. So, that being said, I think I'll just turn the floor over to whoever from Dirty Boys.
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for holding this meeting. I know the conditions outside are troublesome for all of us, and it took a great deal of time and effort for us to get here tonight. The purpose of my purpose or my intention of reaching out to the city of Rawlins is simply to provide the governing body the opportunity to receive all the available information that's readily available and accessible to you so that you can make an informed decision. Tonight is not about bullying, tonight is not about intimidation, tonight is not about personalities. Tonight is simply just providing a snapshot of Ms. Kane's position and then providing you with an opportunity to hear your position without any interruption or issues involving that. The matter before I guess the elephant in the room tonight is the decision by the governing body or a majority of the governing body to deny a renewal application for Dirty Boys. Now, Chapter 8 and the accompanying agreement that's codified in Chapter 8 are the rules and regulations defining waste collection and waste haulers for the city of Rollins. Neither the federal government nor the state of Wyoming have taken the field like they have with alcohol licensing. With alcohol licensing, you have federal guidelines, you have state guidelines, and then you have local guidelines. In this instance, you have the city of Rollins is the primary authority within the corporal limits. You're it. So whatever's in Chapter 8 is the Bible. It's what provides you with your procedures and provides applicants with their procedures in this matter. An overarching principle involving any governmental action requires due process of law. There's substantive due process and there's procedural due process. Essentially, the purpose of that is to make sure that before government takes any action on an individual's right or their property, that they receive notice and an opportunity for hearing. So it's not enough just to give notice, you have to give a full and complete opportunity for hearing. That opportunity has to include an unbiased, undetermined set of individuals that are open to hearing all the information that's presented. And at the time the information is presented, they can hear from as many sides as they want, they can call in whoever they want. But the key is to that is that you have to have a clear mind as you enter into those discussions. It's no different than a judge. If you go before a judge and a judge immediately upon you being charged with a crime indicates to you he knows you're already guilty, it defeats the purpose of that independent judicial review. The same thing can be said when an individual licensee comes before a licensor on allegations or violations. In that instance, you are quasi-judicial because you're hearing evidence, you're taking evidence, and you're going to make a determination. So among those, you have to have that open mind. You have to have that ability to hear all the information that's coming to you, weigh that information against your Chapter 8. Now in this instance, the city had a number of enforcement actions that the city could take for any code Chapter 8 violations. The city could have requested a meeting. The city could have sent a letter. The city could have requested a workshop, any of those things. But typically what the city across the state has been doing, or typically what's common, is they provide their code enforcement officer with a referral for an investigation. So that code enforcement officer, while they are employed by the city of Rollins, they are their own branch. They do their own investigations, they do their own follow-up, and they're not per se answerable to the governing body. And in this instance, had that occurred, you would have had all of the issues that the city has expressed were your primary concerns. Number one, the concerns regarding the tipping fees and the materials coming to the city of Rollins. If a citation, if the code enforcement officer did believe there was probable cause that someone was in violation of Chapter 8, they could have issued a citation. That citation could have been issued as a must appear, meaning they would have to come before your municipal judge. And then during that, they would be advised of the charge, the maximum and minimum penalties, and your judge would be able to provide and order bond conditions. And through that bond condition, immediately could have identified all waste, all materials you pick up in the city of Rollins will be taken to the municipal landfill. she would have had the opportunity, or the alleged violator would have the opportunity to enter a plea, and the tipping, all of the issues involving tipping fees and revenues going to the landfill would be resolved. Then you would still have on this side the opportunity for judicial review whether or not this action does fall within the terms and definitions of recyclable materials. And that, in this instance, would have resolved everything. You would not have been in revocation proceedings. You would not have had to put someone out of business, had customers without services, those types of things. And I do understand the city's role as far as investigating and enforcement. Those are police powers given to you, and they're very, very, very important to local government, because essentially most of your powers are those exercised for the health and safety of the community. But in this instance, a lesser enforcement action would have immediately provided the city all the assurances that you were looking for without taking someone's livelihood or their license. Now, we can't go back. We can't stop what happened or prevent what happened, but we can stop the bleeding moving forward. And that's my intent for being here today. On November 29th, my client submitted a full and complete and eligible renewal license for her hauler's license. She complied with the requirements in Chapter 8. She fully and completely filled out the application on its face, including bonding, including insurance, and signed it. She presented the $250 check that's required in Chapter 8. And then on November 29th, the city of Rollins cashed that check. So the city cashed her licensing renewal check on the 29th. It's currently in the city coffers. And the city set this for hearing for the second meeting in December, which is following Chapter 8. Chapter 8 indicates you have to apply by December 1st, and it's reviewed the second meeting in December. That did occur. What didn't occur is the city staff report seemed to indicate that both haulers were both eligible. It clearly stated that they both have completed everything and everything was on file. The motion was to approve both haulers' annual licenses. And it wasn't until we actually, the council at the end of the meeting called the meeting to order, or called the new business, did anyone hear that in fact Wyoming Waste had failed to provide the $250 licensing fee. Now, I don't know when that was communicated to Wyoming Waste. That's clearly something between Wyoming Waste and the city of Rollins. But that was something that was due and payable at the time of December 1st. Not December 20th, but December 1st. So was it even eligible to be on the license, or to be advertised and on the agenda if it wasn't a full and complete application? That's a question for the city to address. Second to that, absolutely things happen, mistakes happen, things go that way, and I completely understand and I recognize Vice Mayor Wells' statements regarding trying to be consistent or trying to treat licensees similarly situated together, and that's exactly the truth. Chapter 8 has been created solely for those licensed haulers. If a third hauler comes in, you have now 3 haulers that you need to treat consistently. And so now, based upon the city's determination in this instance, the question before you is the next hauler's violation, are you going to immediately go to a violation notice and revocation proceedings? Because that's the precedent that's been set currently. And then if you look through Chapter 8 regarding revocation proceedings, it specifically talks about repeated offenses. And that's important because on the day of your hearing, on December 20th, December 19th, I reached out to your city attorney. Then on December 20th, I contacted your city clerk, your municipal city clerk, and I asked for a party list of all the names I could think of associated with Dirty Boys, including Dirty Boys Sanitation, Rose Kane, and her son. And the only municipal court docket that came back was for Rose Kane for an unlicensed driver some 7 or 8 years ago. That was it. There was no pending Chapter 8 violation for any of those individuals. There was no past convictions of Chapter 8. And Chapter 8 is the garbage and refuse chapter that's adopted by the city of Rollins. So you don't have any confirmed violations on the record. And so in this instance, you're relying on what's on the record. What is on your record? We received a copy of the recording on Friday. That will be transcribed. And reviewing it again, it's a short proceeding. It's not going to take a great deal of time for the court reporter to transcribe that. But in that, there's been a lot of talk about, well, you didn't say and you didn't put on the record. Well, when the licensee completes a full and complete license, that then shifts to the licensor, and the licensor then has to determine, are all of the boxes checked? Have they hit everything in Chapter 8? And that's, I believe, what your city attorney was doing with her matrix that she provided you that night. She gave you a short form indicating this is a requirement, this is a requirement, this is a requirement. And she was able to provide that to you before the meeting. And it clearly identified that absent Wyoming Waste our annual fee, both of them were exactly the same. Exactly the same. So the only hindrance for Wyoming Waste was the fact that the city had not received that $250 check. You go back through to Dirty Boy Sanitation, and you can see that all of those boxes were checked. When you go through Chapter 8, which is the creation from this governing body through years and years, I mean, not this body, but over the years, has determined that this is the rule, these are the regulations that the city of Rollins has adopted for this licensing. That's not to mean you can't change that. That's not to mean you can't, as time evolves, add things to it. But because you have two licensees, you have to bring both of them to the table, and there has to be that negotiation or discussion so that you can get input from not only one but the other. So you can't unilaterally require something from this hauler that's not in the code and not require it to this hauler. You have to treat them similarly. And it's not leveling the playing field. It's treating similarly situated licensees the same. So leveling the playing field in a free market isn't government's job. Government's job is to simply provide reasonable regulations to help guard and protect the health and safety of the citizens, but not try and level the playing field. You're never going to be able to level the playing field with conglomerates that have millions and millions of dollars and mom and pop stores who don't have that money. You can't regulate enough to offset those differences. But what you can do is ensure that all of your rules and regulations apply to both of them equally. And so in this instance, Ms. Kane had a fully and complete eligible application. She met all of the requirements in Chapter 8. There was verification from your municipal court that there weren't any past convictions or pending convictions of any Chapter 8 violations for anyone. After that was indicated, it was back to the city, and then there was a lack of discretion. There was no reason, no lawful licensing authority reason placed on the record for that denial. And specific to that, because you had separated the two out and you had previously tabled the Wyoming Waste license, you had that knowledge as you were entertaining this one. So that actual requisite knowledge for this council was, we have two licensed commercial haulers for the city of Rollins. One of them we have to table because we didn't get their licensing, our annual licensing check. So we're gonna have to table them. That leaves us with one, right? And then you have one, and the one that you have left met all of your requirements. On forms that you approved, yes, check. Are they completed? Yes, check. And then I would ask, have you reviewed the forms submitted by her competitor? Are they completed in full on their face? Is the bonding and insurance and all of that information on its face, or is it sent in an attachment? Because your rules clearly state on forms approved by the city. So my question would be, have we verified that, whether or not they both are complete applications? And that's something that staff can verify as well, because that would be another regulatory issue for this council to undertake as well. But the clearer concerns, I think, for many in the public is this idea of rule of law. This idea that everyone is responsible or fully responsible to all laws. And that includes the legislature that creates the laws. You're not above the law, you still have to act within your law. Now, Chapter 8 is your governing body, or your governing authority, because there isn't anything in state statute that deals with haulers licensing. You can call Wyoming DEQ, they don't license local haulers. And so when you look at Chapter 8, you have to try and identify what is she missing? What eligibility requirements have not been met? What is on your record that shows she's ineligible for a renewal? This isn't a new application, and I want that to be perfectly clear moving forward. This is a renewal of an annual license that's been in place at least 10 years from the city of Rawlins. Other than a change in office space, it's the same parties and principles that have occurred since the beginning. So you don't have a difference in the parties, what they're doing, and who you're dealing with. You have the same bonding on file, you have the same insurance on file. So you have all the assurities that the governing body has determined are going to keep the city in a safe and secure position while they legally operate under this license. Now, the licensing in this situation is not unfamiliar to the city. The city licenses plumbers, electricians, taxi cab drivers. You license secondhand pawnbrokers. All of those are licenses. All of those are grants by you that you authorize. And so I ask you, I know that there were recent issues regarding contractor licensing. So is that going to be your precedent that every time you have an alleged violation for any of your licenses, you're going to immediately go to revocation of their license? That's something for this council to decide, but that's essentially the precedent that's been set in this matter. There was no independent investigation in this matter. There was no citation issued. This council determined to go immediately for revocation proceedings. And so, taking a step back, is that, moving forward, is that the process that the city of Rawlins wants to entertain? And rightfully, you could say, yes, no, I didn't, that was not the indication, or that was not really, that was 5 steps ahead of where we were. We were trying to address what we thought was an immediate financial insecurity to the landfill, which is very, which you could argue very much, because the landfill is one of your enterprise funds. And we did hear quite a bit about the demand and need for landfill and the demand and need for money. But you also have to take that into consideration against the actions of the city in what was going on during that time. In that time, the city absolutely has to pay for closure of cells 1 and 2. Those are the landfill cells. You still have landfill cell 3, which is your construction and demolition. I didn't bring the amounts of the grants that were awarded to the city of Rawlins in closure 1 and 2, or the Bank of the West loan that's paid off. But what I do know is that you have a current 0% loan with the state of Wyoming. It's a 30-year loan. The city's made 4 payments of roughly $54,000 and change. So that's your annual payment for all closures C or 1 and 2. That's it. That's the amount owing. But that doesn't tell the complete tale, because if you look back through the cease and transfer reports that have been given to the state of Wyoming committees, you'll see that $740,000 is sitting in an account for the city of Rollins. That's because landfill closures 1 and 2 came in under budget. And with $740,000, the city of Rollins at some point asked Wyoming DEQ to put those monies aside for transfer. Now that money is available to the city of Rollins for transfer projects. What those are, the city would have to contact Wyoming DEQ. But you need to take that into account when you look at the 0% loan that's out with the state of Wyoming. Now, many people will say, if you have a 0% loan, you're not going to pay it off. You're using someone else's money, so just pay the minimum $54,000 a year until it's paid in full, which arguably makes great business sense. Where it could be problematic is where you're trying to indicate that that's the reason that your costs, your tipping fees are so high, because you have all of these costs associated paying for it. So if you take a look at the amount you have in a 0% loan, the $740,000 that's available for transfers, like transferring solid waste or waste materials, my question would then be, how much is left? What's that difference? And not to say that you don't have a continuing duty to provide a transfer station. Absolutely, you do. But the biggest expense for the city of Rollins will always be those closure costs. Those closure costs to pay for the earthworks, to pay for the requisite fill and all of those things, the water monitoring, all of those things cost money, and that's why landfill 1 and 2 cost as much as they did, and it was a surprising for the city. What won't be as surprising is the closure of the C&D. Just reading reports last week of that indicated we have not seen the likes of the amounts of that closure. Good news is we have time. C&D, we have time to work on that. But we don't want to wait until we have an administrative order requiring us to. So what I would say is, in the last year, the city of Casper reduced the tipping fees for the city of Rollins. They reduced the tipping fees by $10 a ton. $5 was for e-waste when the city stopped transporting e-waste, so that would be your computers, TVs, and those types of things. And the other was they had the city as transporting hazardous materials. Apparently the city had stopped transporting those materials, and once the city of Casper was advised of that, they reduced the tipping fees for the city of Rollins by $10. Well, I went back through the fees with some help from the city attorney and the city clerk, but I was not able to identify anywhere where the city of Rollins took any action to reduce the tipping fees for either the residents or the commercial haulers in that time period. And so it wasn't passed on to your residents or the commercial users, which you can justify if you go back through and you say that extra money was used to pay towards debt, to reduce the amount of debt you're carrying. But unfortunately, you paid the same amount of $54,000 and change to the state of Wyoming that you had the year before. And so moving forward, this is one of those scenarios. I know that the city of Casper right now is looking at increasing their fees. And so that is something that the city will inevitably be focused with. Do you absorb that additional $10 fee that they're doing, or do you pass that on to the customers? And in this instance, it's a little bit more difficult because The savings wasn't transferred back to the citizens in that instance. And so what I would say is there's so much going on with the city of Rollins, it's almost a perfect storm. And so for many residents, the issue isn't landfill, it isn't this, it isn't that, it's all of these things coming together at one time. And the desire to say, let's set some priorities. What's the number one priority? And let's focus our attention on that. I think we can clearly identify just from the financials that the landfill is not on bankruptcy door. That the landfill tomorrow isn't in jeopardy of closing the doors, and those individuals, thank goodness, are not in jeopardy of losing their jobs. But what we can say is we have a municipality that has infrastructure needs, whether that's water, sewer, streets, and even landfill. But to throw all of your attention and all of your effort onto one license, and one license that meets all the eligibility requirements, and then to do so and create a health and safety issue for the city is going to present problems for the city moving forward, because your decision is actually creating that health and safety issue. It's not something that's occurring and you're protecting, or something that happened and now you're protecting. By eliminating or by denying Ms. Kane's hauler's license effective on January 1st, you left the corporal limits without a single commercial hauler for the city of Rollins. Zero, none. If you look through your city, or the Rollins Times, for any type of notification or official notification from the city of Rollins indicating that this issue had been created and here's alternatives or here's what you do, you found something I wasn't able to find. I have not been able to find anything on the website. I haven't been able to find anything in the or the Rollins Times. Businesses have indicated to me, health and medical clinics, they never received notification or read anything in the newspaper regarding they no longer have access to a commercial hauler. Now for many of us, we could pile it into our vehicles and take it out to the landfill, but there are some who don't have the financial means, that don't have a pickup truck, that don't have a physical ability to do that, that because of age aren't able to do that. And then you look at other government entities, they have to have a commercial hauler take they can't have their employees hauling this. And the same thing would go for Memorial Hospital or any of the local clinics. This action, this unsupported action, created a health and safety issue, which is contradictory to the police powers that are granted to you from the federal government through the state government, and that are provided to you for the protection of the health and safety of your government, or of your individuals. And what I would argue is it wasn't just limited to those within the corporal limits. Anyone that was coming within the city of Rollins during this time was subject to not having those commercial haulers in place. Neighboring municipalities that contract with both haulers have issues or could be affected by this. And so what I would say, in this instance, are you looking at the livelihood of one business only? No. These actions definitely have an impact on Ms. Kane's business, a business that's been in place for over 10 years. It could result in the loss of the company. I won't even tell you about the amounts that she has invested in her community in addition to her company. But she had to lay off 9 employees yesterday. 9 local families were laid off yesterday as a result of this. That's 9 families that since November have dealt with the uncertainty of whether or not they're going to have a job. And this is on top of the sole reason, the issue, the elephant in the room, is regarding her belief or furtherance of waste being used as an alternative energy source. Now, a lot's been said about it, a lot can be said about it. You may be one of those individuals that doesn't believe it, doesn't want any part of that, but you can't hide the fact that the EPA studies, the DEQ studies, everything is moving away from treating garbage as garbage. It is moving towards material management and trying to extend the life cycle of these things, trying to find alternative uses, trying to repurpose, reuse, and turn it into something else. Now, Erie, Colorado is one of those. They're not on the commercial grand scale.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is not on the table for tonight.
Okay, so just transferring back, if I could, the city has had a long commitment with recycling. You've created an enterprise fund. You've charged monthly user fees. Just this year, you allocated $70,000 for a lean-to for your recycling. So there has been a long-term commitment by this governing body for recycling. What I would say to you is that was a commitment of you for your continued effort towards recycling. Does the city of Rollins truly want to get into that avenue where you're determining what materials are worthy of recycling and what aren't? And additionally, that $70,000 that was allocated was impact funds. Impact funds which could have been allocated to something else, but you chose this was important. There was Swiffer funds available from Wyoming DEQ for that specific purpose. $70,000 could have been applied for to the Wyoming DEQ to get that lean-to. And then $70,000 on this side could have been reallocated to your police, your fire, your emergency services, water, for instance, to create those engineered costs that you need to be more competitive on your grants. And so what I would say to you is the city of Rollins has so much information and so many issues coming at you. And it's easy to get bogged down and focus on one narrow issue. And so for me tonight, the purpose was to provide you just with all of the information as it relates to Ms. Kane and all the information as we've heard from the public. We are always open. We continue to be open to have an open dialogue with the city council. We welcome open meetings, and I would say preferably that's how this should progress moving forward. If there's a concern between the city and the licensee, bring all the licensees in together, have a roundtable, have a meeting. But in this instance, there isn't much that we can do about what has transpired. But we sure can mitigate and move forward in a positive manner from here. And I would stand for any questions that you may have.
I have one. What do you think started all of this? Why do you think this became so controversial so quickly?
So if you look back at the city's, and that's a great resource. The city has your YouTube videos, your prior meetings on YouTube available. If you look back through, I believe it was in September and December of last year, you had 2 workshops involving this. And in the December workshop, I believe Ms. Kane even provided the city with a private-public agreement for this materials to energy project. Where it got disconnected, I don't know, because even reviewing some notes, there were meetings behind the scenes that even brought Wyoming DEQ to Rollins to discuss this idea of a smaller plant in the city of Rollins, so that something could be done to mine what's currently there and to trap any new MSW, any new methane gas before it gets into the atmosphere.
Well, but that wasn't the controversy. That was no controversy about that. that was brought to the city council. Actually, I think we were pretty enthused about that, wanted to learn more, and why that stopped is because no one came back to us with the information that they said they were gonna go get and bring back to us. And so, as far as I'm concerned, we can still have those meetings, but that just flat didn't happen. The part I'm getting at is, all of a sudden, we're made aware that even though there's a flow control ordinance, which has been tested and sent to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, that tells us that it is not only legal but enforceable, and all of a sudden there is nothing being delivered to our landfill. And the way that we pay for our landfill is by tipping fees, and that is the method that has been set up to pay for, you know, the repayment of the loan that you talked about. We just paid $2 million, well, leased $2 million worth of equipment, which in 10 years we'll have to lease more because they'll be worn out. We have to pay for the employees, the maintenance, the building out there that has some problems, and we need to put new doors and such like that for these birds and whatnot. And that's what started the controversy, is when our revenue stream to the landfill enterprise fund slowed way down because of your client violated the ordinance.
So I would say,
May I?
Yes.
We did not fine them. They did not receive a ticket. All that happened was you found out that they were not tipping over there, and so you told Wendy to go out and file a revocation. The council did not make this decision as a council. The city manager did not make this decision as a manager. You made this decision as the mayor and went after them directly and authoritatively. We never wrote a ticket. So you can't claim that they violated the law when you've never written a ticket to ever have any due process. A cop cannot just say, you were speeding, and run around and tell everybody you were speeding. They have to write you a ticket. We didn't take any enforcement action.
Yes, we did. And what it was our attorney, and Wendy, you can weigh on this if you would, sent a letter stating that they were in violation of that ordinance. And I don't remember all the details, but I think in our books it says give them a 10-day or whatever, or a 3-day notice, and I think we give them a 10-day notice to come into compliance. And that's when they sent back a letter saying, we know we're not in compliance and we have no intentions of being.
Whose direction was that letter sent out from Wendy?
You know, I don't really know.
It was sent at your direction,
No,
not
it
the council,
wasn't.
and
No,
not a
it
city
wasn't
manager.
my
May I intervene?
direction, excuse me.
May I intervene, Mayor?
Yes.
My recollection was that it was brought by staff to this council to take a look at it. It was not ordered to be here. But when we found out of that, it was through our administrative staffing, and it came to us. He allowed it on the agenda, but I don't believe that he asked for this. So I'm just putting, but
And that's fine.
And I concur with what you're saying. There wasn't a citation,
Right.
and I questioned that. Why wasn't there a citation? And they said, well, we can't go backward, blah, blah, blah. That bothered me a little bit, because my take is this, that if you have an ordinance on the books, and just because you don't like that ordinance, just because you don't like it, you just don't quit. You just don't say, I'm not gonna enforce it, or I'm not gonna do it. You can continue to follow the ordinance, and as a citizen, we have the right to challenge that ordinance by going to a council member, asking them to bring it on the floor, ask them to amend the ordinance, a number of ways that we can do to change the ordinance and still follow the ordinance till a ruling comes up. If it goes to court, the judge will say, yeah, the city's wrong, the city's gotta fix it, or vice versa, and that's where I was at. I also remember, Dirty Boys coming to a workshop and discussing, this plant that would generate gas, blah, blah, blah. I had no problem with it. I think I talked to the owners of Dirty Boys and told them that I think it was a pretty good idea. I don't think that they ought to be placed in the landfill, but if they could find property adjacent to the landfill, that would be a good idea. But those are just a workshop. It's not no motions were made or nothing, and that I left it at that. My recollection is that somebody brought up the fact that we were losing revenue at the landfill, and that Dirty Boys was not taking their stuff to the landfill. And I said, well, they're in violation of that ordinance the way I see it. The one that was ruled on by the Supreme Court, that we are the owners of the garbage, and it has to go to the landfill. And that was the way I read it. I could be wrong, but anyway, having said that, I think that if they would just comply with the ordinance completely, and then went ahead and challenged the city ordinance, that'd have been fine with me. I mean, they go to court, the judges or whoever rules on it says that we're wrong and the city has to fix it. If it would have started right there, we would have been done with this. That's the way I read it.
Thank you, Mr. Councilmember DeVary, or Councilmember Martinez. Yes, flow control, just one small correction. It went before the United States Federal Court and then to the 10th Circuit Court, but it did not go before the Wyoming Supreme Court. It has been determined to be a lawful exercise of municipal authority. In this particular instance, though, the city has determined a legal exemption through recycling. The city has created that years and years ago through their recycling program. Now, whether or not a judicial branch is going to recognize that these materials can be viewed as recyclable materials is something left that needs to be decided. And that could have occurred through that citation process, because if there had been a conviction in municipal court, that could have been appealed up, and then that issue was. And I think that was the most troubling part, was everyone was saying, this is challenging flow control. How can this be going on? It's not a challenge of flow control. It's a question of definitions, and I think your city attorney can verify that from the beginning that this was brought before you, it was 110% verified. This has absolutely no challenge to flow control. Flow control has no viability, no application, and no relevance. The sole question is whether or not these materials, which were once viewed as simply garbage, can be viewed as a recyclable material. And that's what's on the agenda, or what's before you.
Councilman Weisenberg.
So, who views this, and give the definition that MS&W waste is a recyclable now? That's just part one, right? And then after that, I want to know why Erie, Colorado does not view it as a recyclable, because that's a personal phone call I made myself. I did my own, hold on. I did my own investigation on this, so I didn't involve anybody else. Erie, Colorado does not consider MS&W waste a recyclable, according to them. They do not consider it a commodity. DEQ does not consider it a commodity. DEQ don't consider anything a commodity of such until it is a byproduct after the product is decomposed in the ground and there's gas coming out, okay? So if it's about a commodity, about a recyclable and stuff like that, I also want to know why then that we have, I hear that it was hauled to Laramie, Wyoming, which is is not a recycle center. It is a landfill, approved landfill, and there was almost, if I'm not stand correctly, I am the one that done all the research on this and found all the information. $17,000 almost worth of tipping fees to a landfill of such in Laramie, Wyoming. So if it's about saying an MS&W is recyclable, Laramie don't consider theirs a recyclable also, or any kind of recycle center also. Just so we get this clear, I mean, in the conversations I did in Erie, Colorado, it's never considered a recyclable.
And I think it's gonna be difficult for you to find anyone or any jurisdiction that agrees about a definition across the board. I think you're gonna have difficulty if you go to Texas and Oklahoma and you identify what's their definition of sustainable material management. It's gonna differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But the idea is when you stop and look at the principle, what's the principle? The goal is to remove as much material from the waste stream as you can through not creating a health and safety issue.
And I understand that, but the goal is to remove the recyclables out of the waste stream, but that's not what's not happening. It was just MS&W trash being hauled.
So are you saying that the capture of this methane before it goes into the atmosphere is not a good thing? That doesn't.
I'm not saying that at all, Ms. Bach. You know what industry I work in, and the amount of scrutiny we're under from any kind of DEQ regulatory business at all. So you understand that quite well, you know. I've never said any kind of ethane gas into the atmosphere is good for anything, not once. But that's we have to monitor for ethane gas at our landfill from the pits that we had before too, right? And I understand everything, but when I talk to Wyoming DEQ, and they say the commodity is an airspace, that's an airspace, right, is what they consider, which is the ethane gas being released, okay? And then they consider this not as a commodity until it's a byproduct. We follow under Wyoming DEQ. We don't follow under Colorado DEQ or anything else here.
Well, if that's the condition, then you're looking at throwing the whole recycling away as well. Because you don't transform or transfer any of the recycling materials.
Well, can I just say one thing, Wendy, and then I'll go to you, but when we're talking about recycling, basically it's to help Mother Earth, and burning 100 gallons of diesel to get a thimble full of methane is a hard sell for me. Wendy?
If I may be allowed to bring us back to topic, I believe that we need to be discussing what is or is not a reason for renewal at this moment. I believe all these other discussions are important, but not for what we're here for tonight. So if we could direct it back to requirements or whatever for the license renewals, I think that would be appropriate.
I agree. One of the other problems I have with all of this is, number one, we didn't do anything wrong. We didn't violate the ordinance. We held our hand up. We stood right out there someplace and held up our hand, took an oath to uphold all the state, county, city ordinances. And that's what I feel I did. That's to start with. One, and the other thing of it is when you took that stuff to wherever you took it to, the city of Rawlins residents are owed money from that. And there's been no talk about repaying the city the lost revenue by you going out of state and out of town. And that was another reason that I didn't feel that I could vote positively on the license, because we're just not gonna skip a couple months worth of revenue and then have to turn around and somehow get it from the citizens of this town. The other thing of it is I just didn't feel there was any reassurance that this is not gonna happen again. I just don't feel comfortable, that we're not gonna cost our citizens more money. There's been hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on attorney fees, fighting this company since their existence. And I don't, that money could have been spent on a lot of really cool things in our community. It's not fair to our community members. So that's why that weighed into my decision. Now, if on the other hand, there would be an agreement to repay those funds to the city, and I realized that we also did not have to haul it to Casper, so not a gross amount, but a net amount, because I wouldn't expect you to pay for that, because we didn't expend it, the city didn't expend it. But that's pretty important to me. And then just something that would make me feel more comfortable that we're not gonna be going through this every year or two. Councilman Durst.
Wendy, I have a legal question.
Yes, sir.
Given that this is a approval for a license, can the council take into effect any personal feelings like that, where he says, I don't feel comfortable doing it? If all of the legal requirements of the license has been met, is the council allowed to put their own personal feelings into the decision? Because if that's true, then that tells me that any garbage hauler is at the whim of 4 council members that could stop it just because they suddenly feel like they don't like things. So my question is, can the council consider anything outside of what's on the ordinance and directly related to the license requirements?
Yes, if those reasons are not arbitrary and capricious.
So what is... Okay, so then my next question is, I'm wondering if we have the authority to hold a hearing like this. I know that part of the problem, we got in trouble with the liquor licenses because instead of city staff going out and ticketing those people and doing the investigation, the city council tried to do their own investigation, and we got in trouble for that because that was crossing the line. Is there any chance that this too could be part of that, where this needs to all be done through staff? As code enforcement needs to go write in a ticket and then come back and bring it, because my understanding is we should be judged, not investigators.
For violations, you are correct, it should be staff. However, this is a renewal process that is solely governed by the council. So the council has the determination and makes the decision on renewals. Once you look at all of the requirements and whether or not they are met, you can consider other things so long as they are not arbitrary or capricious.
So would
Is that
be
stating it
considering a quote-unquote breaking of the law without a citation or any authoritative thing, wouldn't that be arbitrary and capricious?
No.
Because no official citation was written. So the only people that are upset are the council. Given that there has been no citation, there's no proof of breaking the law, there's no evidence of that outside of accusations.
May I make an analogy?
Sure.
Okay. The city is a corporation. Dirty Boys is a corporation. 2 corporations can choose not to do business with one another, even if everything about them meets requirements, so long as the reasons put on the record are not arbitrary and capricious. For example, if one corporation does not feel they can trust another corporation, no court in the land would require one to do business with the other.
Councilman Smith.
Could I just visit with you all 1 minute? First of all, I'm glad you finally came in, lawyer to talk to us. I've been waiting for it and hinted it at for 2 months. Okay, with that said, this ordinance has been in effect on September 1st. It was in effect on November 29th, and It was in effect on December 20th, okay? With that said, my sole reason goes to all of the body of things, strategies that have been used in the public to get this council to give you your license. My trust level, based on the last 8 years that I've been a council person, there's been a number of issues rising, but based on that, I chose to believe that I could not trust, and the letter that was written back to us, I could not trust the dirty boys to follow the ordinance, which clearly states that all of Rollins waste goes to our landfill. It doesn't tell you, and I'm gonna bring up recycling. I have absolutely no problem with somebody taking out the glass and the plastic and at your transfer stations. That's not my issue. But I do have an issue when the ordinance clearly states that you bring all of your waste to our landfill. If you have problems with any of the language, there should have been some kind of discussion from lawyer to lawyer or from principal to our lawyer about how do we fix this, instead of having everything else go on that makes me feel like, you know, I love you people, personally, but I have standards. And when we are told by staff that there's infractions of various things, I have to look at that, and clearly, when you agree that you admit to taking things out, and so I'm going, you know, come on, at least we're talking about it now. But to get back into some kind of posture here and close this door in 2022 and go forward, I'm not opposed to you reapplying or keeping your application, even though it may be outdated. I don't know whether we can still take an application after December 1st or not, or are we, again, not following our procedures? I think that if there is a solid assurance that everything that you pick up in Rollins comes to our landfill, until you work out the other language and other issues, then I, at this point in time, would not have any problems saying, hey, okay, then I'm not sure, I don't know how many tipping fees you paid in an out-of-state facility. But I think that it's only fair to our citizens that at least some agreement comes back to us that maybe we reimburse the landfill for some of that was taken out. That, I'm not here to do away with companies, because we need you. People like you. We need, our people in this community need you. However, when you tell us you're just gonna, for us to take a flying leap and you adhere to the ordinance about taking the landfill or the waste to our landfill, that's where I'm concerned, and it becomes a trust issue. And that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Go ahead.
If I could, just a few things that I think are worthy of clarification. The city, currently, all fees adopted by the city have to be adopted by the governing body. You review them annually and you determine any changes in those fees. The landfill is subject to 2 fees. You have an availability fee, which is a set fee that you have to all of your customers. It's a monthly fee, it doesn't change. And then you have the tipping fee, which accompanies the amount of waste that you put or transfer over the scales for you to work up to you, for you to transfer, for you to handle, for you to transport, those things. So the idea that your tipping fees were reduced would be correct, because you are no longer getting those materials in your transfer station. So you did not have those tipping fees. You also, with those tipping fees, didn't have the costs associated with those tipping fees. You didn't have the storage of the materials. You didn't have to have the employees pushing the materials closer and closer together. You didn't have to wait until the transportation company came and picked it up. You didn't have to pay for the gas or the increase in gas surcharges to haul it to Casper, and you didn't have to pay for the Casper tipping fees. So you're absolutely right. You didn't have the revenue, but you also didn't have the expenses associated with it. But what you did have, and what you continue through that period to have, is that availability fee, which is the amount that this council has determined is the amount to have those services available for the public. That's what the availability fee is set for across the state and across the country. It's not set for just an amount. It's supposed to be the amount that covers the governing body's ability to have those services available, to have a transfer station available. It's going to be a $30 fee. And the same thing goes for recycling. You have a set fee, a monthly recycling fee. That isn't for, you don't get charged more money if you bring in more recycling. You don't get less money if you don't. It's across the board because these are the costs to maintain the recycling center. And this is the cost for all of us to bear to have that recycling center available. And one thing that is particularly troublesome to me, and I don't believe the council is earnestly making this statement, but the idea that you would try and punish someone for challenging a governmental action, whether she's been in litigation with the city for 200 years or cost the city $200,000 in attorney fees, that's a constitutional right and privilege of every citizen. And because she's done that, that can't be used against her as a reason for not licensing her. It goes to that fundamental fairness and ability to challenge your government, which is what we're based on. And the differences of opinion aren't meant to be adversarial. You want those opinions, especially early on, to prevent missteps, to help counteract other opportunities for you to find other alternatives or to find something that better suits this community. Now, to say that this community's needs are the same as everyone else along I-80 would be incomplete or incorrect. What you have before you is you do have a citizen who very much has strong opinions, who very much is willing to put her money where her mouth is, and has retained legal counsel. But in that instance, how is that any different than any one of us in hiring an attorney or trying to seek a judicial decision? Now, what's before you is whether or not the license she's met the requirements of the license. If you are going to require anything additional from her, I'm assuming you're going to be asking for the same from her similarly situated licensee, and if you're not, that's something you can discuss with your legal counsel. But in regard to the issue of repayment for monies lost to the city, what are those amounts? What do they entail? Has anyone ever put paper to pen and said, these are the actual costs and damages associated with you transferring this to Erie, and here's an itemized bill for it?
I'd like to address some of that. First of all, you were saying that we're trying to punish somebody for questioning the legality of an ordinance. That has never been an issue. The issue is that they broke the ordinance. You don't question the ordinance viability or reasonability by just simply breaking it. You just don't. That's not how you challenge an ordinance. You do it a different way. So that's number one. Number two, where you have stated before that you took all of this MSW to Colorado, and then we find out a lot of it went to Laramie. It is hard for us to quantify that exact amount. The only way that it could be done is go back to the historical records on what has happened in those particular months in the past. And that's where I would suggest we start at, and that's a negotiable point. But only you guys would know exactly how much you took, because you said you took it to Colorado, but actually it went kinda here and there and who knows where. So all we could do is go back to the historic numbers to see what that is. Councilman Smith?
I would like to refute, some things that were said. This goes, we still, with regard to cost, yeah, they may not have specifically helped dirty boys out at the landfill during this period of time, but we still had the same amount of people employed. We still had the same benefits we had to pay them. We still had all of the, activities that the landfill does. So what I can tell you is whatever the weight that you paid for at Erie, Colorado, we must, I think we have that somewhere around. Take a look at that and see if that's something you can't work out. And then I need to go back a little bit. I know we probably shouldn't, but I think for 5 years you have been taking things out of Rollins. You've been investigated in previous years. And I think, people have talked to you about that, I'm not sure, but I thought they did. But when it comes to our level, it looks like 5 years of repeated offenses of taking back and forth, no? That's what I've been told, but I just wanted to let you know, that's part of my database. And this is not a personal bias, people, not mine. You can snicker all you want to, but it's not. It goes to that ordinance.
So is there any thought about, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Wells?
I just wanted to say that if that was going on, then there should have been a violation, there should have been a ticket.
Yes.
So moving forward, in whatever way we move forward, if there's violations with either company in the future, we need to follow the specific appropriate way to handle it. Because how do you know that you've committed something if you haven't been given a violation? Does that make
Never been
sense?
handled correctly.
Well, I can see what you're saying, Vice Mayor Wells, I can.
And I also
In the
want to
future.
point out that we're here tonight because we all want what's best for the city of Rollins. We want our trash hauled. I don't want to do it. I have 4 rentals. Nobody wants our trash to just sit in the bins until we have to haul it ourselves. I have elderly grandparents, they can't take it to the curb. But that's what we're here for, so I think that's what we need to focus on. I know everybody has hardships in this room, but ultimately we gotta focus on what's right.
Well, one of
But
the.
we need trash.
I agree with all of that, but honestly, one of the things that needs to happen is the city does need to be reimbursed for the lost revenue.
Then perhaps the city could come up with some numbers and quit making the argument without having any facts or figures. You've gone out publicly multiple times and said, it's 160,000, everybody's gonna pay
Who
another.
said that?
You've said that multiple
I have
times, you
not
have
said
Stu.
that.
And
That
then you
was-
told shush, you told multiple
Whoa,
times, you
point of
said,
order.
Kind of order.
it's gonna
Point
be
of order.
$60 more per person because of everything that they've hauled. We've come up with no numbers whatsoever. Nothing, not a $0 value. So I'm fine with having a discussion about the fees, but let's come up with a number first.
Well, then we can't do that tonight.
Councilman Martinez.
Again, I have visited with the manager, finance department, and I have asked for those numbers. Where they're at on that, I don't know. I don't get involved a lot with what the staff is doing, but I have the right to ask them where we at on this and that. I haven't gotten any answer to that. My take is there was a question asked, I believe in one of the meetings, would Dirty Boys Sanitation be willing to sign a letter saying that they will follow the ordinance as it is? Now, whether you want to challenge it or not, that's fine with me. I think you have that right to do that. But I would like some assurance that we're not gonna have to go through this. I won't be here, but the other council will have to go through this all of next year. If they just had a letter saying, we will comply with the ordinance the way it's written and come to some kind of agreement on that, I think this would solve that problem. Then we could probably go forward. The other thing is the amount, I don't know, I've heard numbers, I know the 160 came up from a gentleman that was sitting in the audience that said, well, if they get 160,000, I get 160,000. Well, the city can't be doing that, for Wyoming Waste or for anybody. But I don't think the city ought to be in a position where we, are compromising our ordinances. If it's another company come in here and say, well, I don't like this rule, and we need to change it. Well, that's fine, there's ways to change it without violating it. And if we would just went back to that, I think we'd solve this. We won't have this problem. And I don't know if that's something that you're willing to do or not. I don't know that.
I would,
Wendy?
May I attempt to boil this down? I'm trying not to play mediator, but, council, would you reconsider the renewal if Dirty Boys and Wyoming Waste both agreed to review numbers and determine what, if anything, either company owes to the city, and B, agree to follow the ordinance as written and continue negotiations about disagreements with definitions? Would those two assurances by Dirty Boys and Wyoming Waste fix the current issue?
I believe it would with me.
I think it would too. I mean, basically, that's what I was asking for, if they would sign something saying that we agree to follow this ordinance and let it go at that. And then if any company, whether it's Dirty Boys or Wyoming Waste, wanna challenge the city, that's their right. They can challenge the city all they want if they wanna hire lawyers and stuff. But I don't think that we ought to be going over this and over this. It's hurting this community, for one. I don't think it's helping it any. I was perfectly happy doing business, the way I had it. I had to change, but, not my doing, but I changed. But I think that that's what we need to do. I think if we get back to those two basics, we'll be okay, and then we can go from there. We won't be okay because there's still gonna be disagreements, and I understand that people, there's a lot of ordinances I don't like, that I fight for all the time, but if you don't have the majority of the vote on this council, you don't have anything. But that's my take on it.
Vice Mayor Wells?
My only concern with the amount is we don't have an amount. So I personally, if I was a company, don't know if I would say, yes, I will pay whatever amount you tell me to pay. Because, you know, the day that comes and they find out the amount and then they're sent a bill and it's some outrageous number, that's a lot of,
I would go
there
this
should be
far,
an
though.
option to have at least a payment plan too.
That's not what I was implying. I meant together,
Okay.
we work towards the number.
Yeah,
After a renewal of the license.
Correct, as
Right.
long as we have that agreement to work together, both on the letter of assurance and on the final numbers. Not that we're going to arbitrarily throw something out for you to sign. That's not what I intended at all. This is a collaborative that I'm asking if we can do.
I think this finance director was in the middle of doing some of that stuff, right, to kind of get a number, and, you know, it's gonna be, I believe it'd be a fair number across the board with the reduction of everything else from the hauling and stuff like that, from what I had seen, or I haven't seen no number, right, from seeing in the talks my own self, you know, with him, but absolutely, I believe we could all come to an agreement, and I understand you can't just throw a number out there, but you know what I mean, cause I would be the same way. I'd never agree to some huge number that couldn't possibly be. But if there's historical data, things like that could be taken into account, I believe, if they can work together as a collective party and go from that, absolutely.
I can't agree to nothing, I guess is what I'm saying. I can't agree to zero. is.
I would
It has, no,
personally.
well, I'm not
Say,
saying
yeah, sign me
they
up.
would have to accept whatever we get, but that isn't even reasonable, but there's surely an amount that them and the city can agree to.
I believe it goes for both. I mean, both companies also. I'm not partial, and I don't make my bias a bias or personal decision on anything. Okay, I take in the facts to account and consideration of what's gone on and everything else, and that's where I make my decisions up here. So I want the same to be followed from Wyoming Waste also. The other night I voted no to postpone a license because I'll be straight honest, without a check or the funds, they didn't deserve a license also. So someone to say I'm personally biased about any such decision, that was the reason I said no on postponement. So people understand that. It's not a personal decision I'm making. I want fair equality here through the whole thing. Work it out. Let's figure it out.
Councilman Smith.
I voted no on the other hauler's license too, for this one reason. But the only reason that I didn't have any heartburn with tabling it is because they said they had already sent a check. And I did not know if any of our administrative finance people had taken that check, not told somebody. We needed some time to figure out if they were gonna come into compliance. A little bit different on the other side. It went to, like I said, some trust issues here. But again, if there's some commitment to us that there's no infractions, they'll come to our landfill. They'll work out some kind of repayment based on the weight that they took to Colorado. Then I don't have a problem giving their, having them apply for and giving them a license. But I only have until tomorrow, halfway through the meeting, to help you guys out, okay?
Vice Mayor Wells.
I am just curious because I don't know how it was advertised, but are we allowed to make motions on the floor tonight, or will this all have to be in the meeting tomorrow?
Anything decided or voted on tonight will be temporary and has to be ratified at the next regular meeting.
What I would suggest is that we, it's not on the agenda now, that we put it on the agenda for tomorrow.
And that will also give us a chance to have these documents ready so that at the time that the council votes on it, we can have these documents in front of the council.
Real quick question on that for legal purposes of the advertisement of the agenda and stuff. Is it better for us just to amend at the start possibly?
We can
amend
do
to
both.
That?
We can absolutely do both. We can put it out immediately that it's going to be added to the agenda with our regular advertising, and we can also have the actual motion and vote at the beginning of the meeting tomorrow night.
Is it gonna be in time to make press and all that stuff if need be? Is that needed at all or no?
Not for this amendment, because
Okay.
you're also
Okay.
gonna make it in public.
It's old business.
Okay.
I have one more question, and it's about Wyoming Waste. Have we received the check and has?
We have received all the payments. They are completely fulfilling their eligibility, and they are also going to be given the same documents and chance to edit those as well. Everybody, all three parties will be in on these documents.
Mayor, I guess I'm gonna ask their legal counsel and Rose if this is agreeable. Is this something that will work out with you folks?
Yes.
Okay. Then we can-
I just wanna say there's nothing would make me happier than to have both haulers back in business, feel good about it, know they're gonna do the right thing, and get back on track, and look forward to, further discussions and, whatever the future may hold. You guys have been my friends. This has been very hard on me. It has. But when you take an oath, you have to live up to it, and I feel like I have. And It's not been personal. I haven't gone out of my way to make it rough on anybody. And I don't care what anybody believes, that's absolute truth. And I do look forward to putting this thing to bed and putting all these people back to work. Hell, I'm related to some of them. You may not even know that, but I am. Councilman Weisenberg.
One other thing, Rose, could you please come back to the table with the recycling thing to the council? Maybe work with the city manager, set up a workshop with us all again during this new year coming up, and we can discuss this again, because I like the idea, I really do. I think it's beneficial to not only our community, but the way you guys presented it, the state, right? Because you had multiple communities ready possibly to commit to that, right? Which is a great thing. Trust me, when I talk about the environment, I really believe in that stuff. I mean, I work in a horrible field to say that stuff sometimes because of the stuff I see, but I want to see some kind of growth with this, please.
Chris, the only reason our talk stopped is because your economic development quit. That's what caused the issues to stop. We are still, and the price that the first quote we got was
Astronomical,
way
I
too
remember.
much. And we have subsequently found another company that we think we can work with that's much lower. And we're thinking that working with this new company, it might come in at a price that all of us can afford.
That'd be good. I mean, we don't have an economic development director here, right? I urge you to have talks with the city manager a little bit, maybe some other people within the city and ourselves,
Well, I was
please.
told that isn't Pam there now, kind of your,
Yes.
She's working, helping now,
right,
yes.
and so she is on the
She's
next-
working with DDA,
right.
but also with economic development
So she'll be
with
the
the
next
rest
person
of the
to
city.
So please, Rose, come forward with that to us, so we can hear that as a council, and the new council can hear that, and we can, build that relationship. And I mean, it's a great idea. We liked it. I promise you that. So,
Vice Mayor Welch, you had something?
Sorry. It was profound, I can tell you that.
I forgot it.
All right, is there any last thoughts? Well, thank you guys thank you council for coming in for a special meeting. Thank you for coming and talking with us, and hopefully we can grow some fruit.
thanks for picking me up at the house. It's not pretty up there.
Appreciate it.
Adjourn at 6:50, sir?
So moved.
So if you have a piece of equipment, I'm willing to.
I tried to get up to his house, I couldn't, he had to walk.